1, 2. One, two. Hey. What's that? Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. It is a good afternoon. Wow, you guys got quiet real fast. That was good. We'd like to welcome everyone to the Charles Ogletree Public Forum Series, Keeping the Faith, Civil Discourse on Campus. It's a presentation of the Union Chapel Education and Cultural Institute and co-hosted today with Boston University. Yes. As part of BU Week on Martha's Vineyard, our annual opportunity to celebrate all the fabulous and great things about the Boston University. My name is Karen Holmes Ward. I'm clerk of the Forum Series and a Boston University alum. And on behalf of Richard Taylor, who is president of the Institute and also a BU alum, and Boston University's very first Rhodes Scholar, we both want to welcome you to this space. So this August, our Forum Series is proud to present some of our country's prominent thought leaders, sharing their perspectives on a wide range of topics impacting our community. These public forums carry forth the legacy started by the great attorney and activist Charles Ogletree, who held similar forums here on the Vineyard in summers past. Now, if you all can't make it to the Vineyard this summer, don't worry, you can still join us. All of our Charles Ogletree public forums will be live streamed this summer. Today, you can watch us on unionchapelmv.org, and we also will be live streaming on the BayStateBanner.com. The Bay State Banner is a weekly Roxbury-based newspaper reporting on political, economic, social, and cultural issues of interest to communities of color and has been Black-owned since 1965. We thank them for their support. And now it's my pleasure, thank you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Boston University's 11th president, Dr. Melissa Gilliam. Dr. Gilliam is a research scientist and a physician trained in obstetrics and gynecology with a wealth of experience as an accomplished educator, scholar, and administrative leader. In her first year as president, she has focused on establishing a set of shared community values, building upon the institution's strengths in convergent research, growing the presence of the arts on campus, and creating new partnerships locally and across the world. We are so pleased to have her here with us today. I ask you to join me in welcoming President Melissa Gilliam.
Karen, thank you so much. Thank you, Richard. I'm so happy to be here with you all today. It takes a lot of work and persistence to create communities like this and to create opportunities like this. And so I'd like to thank Karen Holmes Ward and Richard Taylor for all they do on behalf of Boston University. So thank you both so much. Today's topic, Keeping the Faith, Civil Discourse on Campus, is relevant to Boston University's founding principles. We have for a long time been an institution that has encouraged and facilitated civil discourse in the exchange of viewpoints and ideas. I like to quote our founding president, William Fairfield Warren, and he called the university society realizing the highest known ideals in individual and social character and life, and of propagating these ideals from one generation to another and from one land to another, so long as the world shall stand. And I like this quotation for its aspiration, and it sets a high standard for us to reach. And historically, the people of Boston University and this institution have aimed high, and at times we've achieved greatness. So from its beginning, Boston University has championed a diversity of backgrounds and identities experiences and perspectives, and that is essential to learning. We have also championed free speech, but also listening to ideas and viewpoints with which we disagree. And that's very important for institutions like Boston University because since our inception, we have been open to all people from all backgrounds, regardless of their identity, and the ability to allow individuals to both speak but also to be heard is essential to who we are. And so this year, as Karen mentioned, we launched a project that is focused on issues of openness and dialogue. And this is called Living Our Values. And this is to identify and embody and promote the core principles and beliefs that unite our community. And these are beliefs that guide our decisions, our behaviors, our actions in ways that create an inclusive community, but also make us a place of integrity. And so it is a project that also seeks to enhance dialogue. And one of the reasons I'm particularly excited about this program is that one of our leaders is someone that you will hear from this evening, and that is our wonderful panel moderator, Nick Bates. So Nick is a little low-key, but let me tell you, he does amazing and beautiful work. He is the director of the Howard Thurman Center for Common Ground, and he is dedicated to fostering environments that promote civil discourse and healthy identity development. He's also a person who continues to read, study, and share the work of Howard Thurman. I read the book that you gave me daily, so know that you're educating me. So given our long history of openness and institutions such as the Howard Thurman Center, Boston University can continue to be a model for how to do this work well. And I look forward to continuing this work with you, Nick, and others who make this a reality. So we like to uplift all activities like those of the Howard Thurman Center and that are sponsoring environments such as living our values and creating the spaces where our young people can learn about sharing their perspectives, understanding who they are in order to understand others. So Nick, thank you for your leadership, and I look forward to hearing you lead today's discussion.
I just want to say this is the second time at an event where I've had to follow President Gilliam, and it's not fair. I don't like it. I mean, I enjoy it, but it's a lot of pressure. But we'll figure it out. Once again, my name is Nick Bates. I'm the director of the Howard Thurman Center for Common Ground here at Boston University, and I never like to take any stage or any platform at Boston University without speaking to the elders that paved the way for me to do the work that I do in the Howard Thurman Center for Common Ground. And so not here with us, but always here in spirit and love and pluralism is Ken Elmore, who without Ken Elmore, there is no 808 Commonwealth Avenue, which we get to sit in and do this wonderful work. And then, thank you. And then sitting in the audience is the first ever paid director and Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, Catherine Kennedy, who never hesitates to tell everybody that she felt like I should be her successor. So it's a great honor to do that, and it's a great honor to follow in the footsteps who had the opportunity to sit with Sue Bailey Thurman, because there is no Howard Thurman without Sue Bailey Thurman, and I consider her the greatest practitioner of his work to ever exist. And there are many disciples of Thurman we can point to, such as Martin Luther King, Derek Bell, etc. Sue Bailey Thurman is the greatest practitioner and greatest challenger of his ideas that he had ever had. And so it's amazing to always be connected to history and to be able to revisit it to determine what our future will be. And I get the honor of sitting next to some really amazing people who get to help me with this topic. Because I'll tell you that I'm inundated with this work right now, but I don't have all the answers. And there are so many ideas in my head each and every day trying to figure out, which I think our panel will speak to, how do we create the climate that allows for us to have difficult conversations and to navigate difficult ideas. I don't think there's a solution, but I do think there's an environment that we can create where we can say things that are challenging for each other to hear and to be able to process respectfully and acknowledge that I am entitled to disagree and voice a different opinion. And I think we've strayed away from that type of environment and climate. And so I'm hoping we could speak to this today. So we have some illustrious folks to my left, and I'm going to stop talking because I actually want to hear them more than I want to hear myself. And so I would love if you all can do us the honor of introducing yourself to our audience in your own words.
Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Kim Atkins Storr. I am a senior opinion writer and columnist at the Boston Globe. I'm also a commentator on MSNBC, and I have a couple of podcasts. One is called Justice by Design, and the other I co-host is called hashtag Sisters-in-Law. I am a double terrier. Well, I feel like I'm a triple terrier because I went to BU Law School. I also have a master's from BU Com School, and I am an alum of WBUR, where I was the first Washington-based correspondent for WBUR. So I'm a triple terrier, right? And I'm honored to be here for this conversation.
And we are so lucky at the Boston Globe to have her. I am Janae Osterheld, Deputy Managing Editor of Culture and Development Strategies at the Boston Globe, and a recovering columnist, and founder of A Beautiful Resistance, which is a multimedia platform within the Boston Globe told through the lens of the Black gaze and the Black gaze only. We invite everybody to the party, but it's for us. I do a lot of short form filmmaking, moderating, and community space making outside of the Globe. But that's just my little short bio.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation with you all. I'm Paula Austin. I'm Associate Professor of History and African American and Black Diaspora Studies at Boston University.
Okay, so I want to bring you all into our world in the Thurman Center. We don't host any conversation in our space without giving people, I call them ground rules, but it's really a ritual. It's meant to fortify the environment that we have. I look at our space as a space that anyone can come in and have a conversation about anything. Right now, our students are inundated. They're still talking about Love Island. So I've learned a lot of something I've never seen in my life, and I know a lot of names and a lot of dynamics that I do not understand. But I say that to say that any conversation that we have, we always make sure that we tell our students a couple things. Number one, that our space is governed by the love ethic that Howard Thurman created. So he would say it has three components. One, the first component would be that you must want to love quite simply because everyone wants to receive love. It's really simple. Secondly, he would say that love requires a disciplined use of the imagination. He would articulate it as the ability to project oneself forward onto another, not to become them, but to envision the circumstances that they've endured, and that you must report those findings back accurately with no judgments, right? I call it an intentional empathy to make it simple for him. And then lastly, he would say that there must be a sense of leisure in love. Though we must not chase that sense of leisure, we love one another quite simply because of the first thing. Everyone wants to receive love. So I always say that everything that we offer in this space is offered with love, and we expect it to be received as such. And if it cannot be that way, none of us deserve the space, period. With that being said, I got some really hard questions from y'all, and I hope y'all got some really hard answers. I'm doing y'all just like we do the students, right? we have this fascinating topic about how do we keep the faith in the fact that we need to have conversations with each other and they're essential to life. I hear a lot of times when we hear opinions that we do not like, we point to significant figures in history and their values, and we use that to discount opinions that we do not like. I love it. It's interesting to me. I don't think it's completely true because I've seen our heroes sit with many of people that they disagree with. And so the question that I want to start with you all is, as scholars of a different vein, right? I've had a couple professors put me in my place. And they say that there are scholars who create knowledge, and then there are scholars who preserve knowledge. And so, as scholars on this panel, right, people who preserve knowledge and history, what responsibility do you think our institutions of higher education have to lead in the vein of creating a climate for civil discourse? I'll let you all figure out who takes that first.
Oh God, it's me? Jesus, okay. Yeah, I mean, I would love for our universities to be leaders in not just creating space, but actually understanding what civil discourse is, helping other people understand what civil discourse is, providing spaces for civil discourse. I would really like our universities, higher ed, to be leaders in that. Locally, you know, for the campus, but also locally, regionally, and nationally. I don't think that answers your question about responsibility, but it, you know, if I had my druthers, I would say, yes, let us be leaders in making sure that other people understand actually what civil discourse is.
Yeah, I think that's important. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about my educational experience, not just my professional experience in preparing for this discussion. And I remember learning not just about civics, which doesn't happen enough before I got to college, but I remember specifically in high school having a class about civil discourse and talking about and showing examples of how people from, you know, different points of view had to come together and build coalitions, and sometimes it was harder and sometimes it was easier, but you had to hear people out. And I remember learning and thinking about that, and that was tremendously helpful to me as I went to a college campus. And to me, part of the excitement, the joy about going to college, because honestly, I knew I wanted to go to law school. So for me, when I was in college at Wayne State University in Detroit, it was just, okay, what can I learn? What can I do? What's going to be fun? Because I'm going to go to law school. So, you know, as long as I get into law school, these 4 years are just, you know, for knowledge and fun. And it was important to me to hear from people from different backgrounds and different thoughts and think about different philosophies. That's what it was about, and that's what helped me understand myself, understand my views, have my views tested by really smart people who I respected, who thought differently. That was part of what college was all about. So later, this was a while ago when when colleges began talking about safe spaces on college campuses, and I understood that there was a reason for these calls, that there were people who were not being respected in their space and people who were not feeling comfortable where they were. But I was really uneasy with the idea of safe spaces because we are educating people who are going out in a real world where there will not be those safe spaces. And what they need is the ability to navigate in the world and to know that there are people who think differently, to know that there are people who are educated differently from them, and to have the ability to function as a society in that way. And so that sort of brings it full circle here. I feel like we, universities, began pulling back and really wanting to silo different discussions in a way that is making the current climate, when there is now a federal government pressure being put on campuses, that they don't know what to do. They don't know how to step. And I think part of that was from already learning some wrong lessons and leading them to right ones. So I think it's crucially important.
I'm gonna tag on to a little bit of what Kim was just saying. So I went to a HBCU, Norfolk State University, and during my time there, I was exposed to many, just all of the Black is beautiful from across the diaspora, and we had different cultures, different identities, and vastly different opinions. I remember being in Dr. Pendleton's class, and we would argue, and then we would go eat lunch. Everybody still loved each other. But then when I was a Neiman Fellow at Harvard, there was this real, and it was right around the time of the rise of safe spaces. And I think that there has been, I think with the participation generation has come a watering of a garden that is complicit in conflating discomfort with danger and disagreement with violence. So once we started making it like everyone in the class has to have a invitation to your birthday party, or you can't have a birthday party, or tell people about your birthday party at school, or everyone on the soccer team gets a prize even if they didn't win, it kind of cultivated, it was like these small little steps that led us to where we are now, that if anyone's uncomfortable, that equates to violence. When the real violence is suppressing truth and not cultivating a culture of being able to have civil discourse so we can learn and grow from one another. And it is in these, yes, a lot of this starts at home, of course, but it absolutely, to bring it back to what the response, it is the responsibility of academic institutions to teach these things. It is academic institutions that made parents give all these invites out to everybody in the class and decided that sports teams everybody had to get a prize. So it's like academic institutions do have to play a role in creating language that is actually very nuanced, because I know that the calls for safety came from a real place. But if we're not nuanced and very real about it, we're gonna continue to fall down this hole that we're in of silos, and that is the real thing that is posing a threat to our safety.
You all made me want to pivot because I had a different question, but I like the direction that y'all took this in. I remember when it was time for our most recent election, and there's a question that I asked our students. We were having a conversation about the politics and the policies related to the presidential election, and I asked the students, does your university have a responsibility to ensure that you have a civic education? And almost every student I asked in the room said no. And I thought that was an interesting response, that a university, right, a place that is considered a marketplace of ideas and throughout history have been places that give authority to knowledge throughout history, does not have that students would think that it does not have a responsibility to make sure that they have an education on the issues that are happening nationally that could impact things globally. I mean, we've seen that. They then said, no, I don't want to get this information from my university. And I thought that was fascinating. So I said, well, where do you expect to get that information from? And they said, well, I get it from TikTok. And I get it from social media, and I get it from YouTube. And I said, so you invest in a high quality education that, depending on the institution, could be really expensive, and where you are supposed to engage in an intellectual upbringing, ushering, evolution, enterprise, and you do not expect these people that have expertise to actually educate you on something so critical to your life. I thought that was fascinating. I'm setting the context here because many of us are going to say, what's the answer to this issue? And we're going to say, read. And I used to say that all the time. And then I thought to myself, I just don't feel like that's a nuanced response, because you could read the wrong things. You could be scrolling on a social media site, reading a lot of the wrong things, and wrong is subjective. But it's safe to say you could be reading information that has not been verified, that has not been fact-checked, that has not been given any source of validity, as opposed to reading with the people who have been trained to give validity to ideas. So my question is for you all, how is it that we create a climate where people learn to embrace nuance again? And this is three people who deal with words. So I kind of think that you all have the answer and you're going to solve everything right now.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think in this moment, the biggest impediment to the embrace of nuance and context and deeper understanding complexities is the polarized environment that we are living in, and also I think with the acceleration of social media, also the desire to have everything be quick and understood, and explain quickly in simple terms, that removes us of the responsibility of seeking nuance, seeking context, seeking a deeper understanding of things. And that polarization isn't just political. I mean, I think it runs much deeper in the society, where either you are on, when there's any sort of debate, you're either on one side or the other, and if you're on the other, you're my op, and I have to fight you. Whereas I never saw things in that way. When I was educated, we were assigned not just even in literature. I just saw a report saying that the top 10 most assigned literature books, you know, it had all the things that we read, To Kill a Mockingbird and Hamlet and all these other things, but I looked, and the most banned ones, of course, are books by Toni Morrison, you know, and other Black writers, you know, Audre Lorde and other things that were the most banned. And I looked at all the books that were assigned, and there was one main Black character in all of the most assigned one, and he was a criminal defendant in To Kill a Mockingbird. Like, that was the only bit of diversity in that. Yes, that was a moral tale that was important, but that's just the world that we're telling people about. And how can you get that better understanding or different views if you don't read the things? I think it's not just the energy of wanting to ban certain books or ban certain thought from the conversation. It's just the idea that foments this idea that there is a right and wrong answer to everything. And you just have to find what it is, and you dig into that, and you stay there. And that gets to my original point about testing why you think what you think. Having smart people who think differently help you think through your own views. Why do I believe that thing? Let me think about that some more. I may want to change my mind, or I may want to have a slightly different take on this position. That's how we grow, and that's how we better understand the world. But the polarization of everything, I mean, even what people thought about the Coldplay couple, like, it's this side or that, it's everything. There is polarization, and it's really hard in this kind of culture to break through. I give my hats off to educators, because that must be a particularly bad job, because I know as a journalist, first of all, when I just show up, people already want to label who I am. They wanted to, when I worked at the Boston Herald, they already knew who I was and whatever, and Fox News would call me, and I'm like, I'll go on. I'm gonna say what I think, but maybe you don't want me to go on. But they already had an idea about me, or who I was, or where I was from. You know, as a Black woman showing up, they already label me, tell me what, you know, no matter what I write about, there are people who refuse to hear what I say. And I think that is the problem to getting to that complexity and nuance. Sorry, I've spoken too much.
No, you haven't. And I have so much I want to say about book bans, but I want to stay on I want to answer the question, and then maybe we could pivot back to book bans. And what she said is why I'm a recovering columnist. The death threats and things, and changing addresses and phone numbers. It's been a long 20-some years.
FBI.
Yeah, it's exhausting. But something, Nick, that you said earlier, and Kim, you too. I think Kim, you said, you know, they're not your op. as a columnist, I definitely was like, oh yeah, you're my op. But how I handled it was not you, but the conservatives who wanted me to die. But how I handled that was different than how people are handling it now. How I handled that is, how do I get to know them, their argument, and their perspective so that I can better deconstruct it and unravel it and read them. Because I'm not going to be a great columnist if I don't actually know my enemy and I don't know my op. I don't know how to converse with them and spar with them and better advocate for us. And then, Nick, something you said that made me think about how we get to the part about teaching nuance, and you opened with the Love Island comment. So in my role, one of the many jobs I have is the interns, co-ops, and fellows report up to Paula, who reports up to me. So I deal with young people day in and day out. And I've heard all the safety comments and the violence that's not violence, and workplace bullying that is really just someone held you accountable for something. It's a lot of conflation and a weaponization of therapy speak. But with Love Island, and it's this perfect opportunity to meet them where they are, to show them nuance with the Coldplay situation, with TikTok, with Instagram, to meet them where they are. Often when I am having sessions with them, I do my best to figure out what it is they like, what it is they're singing and dancing to and watching and consuming, what influencer they love, and how can I meet them there to draw the through lines to contextualization, to nuance. In Love Island, you have issues of classism, of xenophobia, of colorism, of misogynoir. There's so many conversations you can have based on that lend themselves to nuance. Yeah. And one of my favorite assignments to give young journalists is particularly student journalists, is to send them back to campus and make them interview someone they thought they didn't like. And not someone who they know they don't like for good reasons because they got personal beef. I mean, every now and then all of us have someone we just decided we didn't like. No reason, you're just like, I don't like the way their face sat. So I assign them, hey, go interview that person. Figure out why you don't like them. Maybe you like them, but you won't know until you have this conversation. Do the journalism on the situation and on the person. And that's kind of like, chipping away and trying to get them to open up to the idea of nuance and context.
So I want to say, and not just because my dean and my president are in the room, just to be clear, this is not why I'm answering this in this way. I have found it interesting, the difference between being at an event at the Thurman Center that you're facilitating, right? A conversation around a particular issue, when we looked at the executive orders, for example, versus in my classroom or in some of the classrooms of my colleagues. I do think that they are getting training in nuance. Now, to apply that is harder once they've walked out of the classroom. We're doing something very specific in the classroom with a very specific set of materials. And yes, it is my expectation that they're going to walk out of my class and out of the university with the ability to apply all of those critical thinking skills that we've been working on in the classroom. But I do think there's a difference. I think what I've noticed is that in those conversations where they're not working on a specific thing in a specific subject in their classroom, that they are kind of talking about things the way that they have the norm of talking about kind of our culture at this very moment, and how they're thinking about political things and how they're thinking about social and cultural things. And I think the other thing, and this is a continuation from young people during the pandemic, is that they're incredibly oversaturated, and sometimes that means that they're sort of lazy in when they're having conversations about things. It isn't once you talk with them a little bit longer, it turns out they are actually thinking about something, or they are. So I think I think the question for me is about on a college campus, and I think that we have evidence of our students being incredibly thoughtful over the last few years, and thinking globally and understanding, global situations and understanding why they are important in their current local place. I think the thing that is happening right now that makes it hard is this. Is I don't think that there's enough conversation about why it's important to have, what is civil discourse, why is it important to have it, right? This idea that not all conflict is abuse or violence. And what are we trying to build? What's the goal of it? And I think that, I actually think that that has happened in some spaces where students are protesting over any number of things over the last, 20 years. That those conversations are happening on the ground, but the sort of capacity of the university to support, encourage, help them kind of do the things they're trying to do on college campus. I mean, my college experience, which was a very long time ago, so I'm not gonna, but I felt we did a lot of campus protests, and all of our faculty pretended they were, not allowing it, but they were, they canceled classes, and part of it was that they were kind of helping us have the experience on campus in a relatively safe environment on campus to protest, any number of the things that we were protesting. And in some cases, we did break actual laws on campus because our campus was in the city.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. I mean, no, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. But so I think but they definitely saw it as an opportunity for us, kind of under their guidance. To us, that was unknown, but to kind of help us get ready to be outside in the world. And, I want to also talk about safe spaces briefly, because I also came up in the safe space generation. I think what was important about those safe spaces, and the way that I understood it and the way that we were doing it, was that you had a safe space where you could have those hard conversations and there was some trust built. And the goal of it was then to go out to take that confidence that you got from being able to work through some of those things, and then you would be able to do that stuff with other people with whom it was less quote unquote safe, is how I understood the way that those spaces were supposed to work.
Yes.
I don't know what happened in the interim, but that's how I understood those.
Yes.
Maybe that's what, yeah.
You present a really excellent counter perspective that I think we can fall away from because we can become a little bit cynical. So I got to call us in a little bit, because I sometimes I hear folks say all of these conversations are challenging with students, and I'm sitting there not for me. That's not my experience. That's not what's happening in our center, right? I am listening to students speak about everything. I am watching them flawlessly transition from politics to a TikTok video they saw and why they don't like the dance and how it's appropriating culture. I'm watching them teach people about a symbol for clocking tea and what the history of that symbol comes from, and the documentaries linked to that, to then coming back to talking about the reality television show. I am watching them flawlessly weave through these things. But what I'm also noticing the challenge is that we have faculty and staff who are struggling to facilitate environments where students are having these same challenging conversations. And there are a couple factors. I think one, we have gotten to a space in higher education where it can be very transactional. So a student is I'm just here to get an A. And I remember I was teaching a gender studies course, and I walked in on the first day, and I said, I don't care what grade you get. And they were like, excuse me? No. I'm here to get an A. And I said, if you get an A, it doesn't matter to me. And they said, then why am I here? I said, well, my goal is to hope that I teach you how to critically think about the subject. And they said, well, what does that have to do with my A? And it's in that moment, in that exchange, that I learned like something is missing in the transactional spaces. And I'm pulling in this direction because I want to talk about what is the bandwidth of our faculty, staff, and support professionals at our institutions, and what are some things that create fear for them to actually do some of the things that I'm mentioning, right? I have a particular set of privilege in that space, and I'm in a space where it was designed to do exactly what I do. So I know my privilege looks different than others, and frankly, like my skill set has been refined in a certain way to do what I do. But others may not have that luxury or training in experience. And when I say luxury, like we are watching faculty lose research grants for certain words being in the category of the grant, or the grant being designated for a particular population to create equity at a university, right? So how do we sort of reconcile this moment for faculty, staff, and support professionals? Particularly, again, you all are preservers of knowledge, and so you all are wonderful at archiving, writing, researching, and articulating a viewpoint for those who may not feel that they have a voice to do so. So my question, to be a little bit more succinct here, is what's the responsibility for our universities and or our communities to create an environment where faculty, staff, and support professionals feel comfortable creating a climate for students to have these conversations? Y'all got all the answers. I don't know anything. I'm just here. I'm a conduit, you know.
Well, I mean, you know, I think I want to say, for some of us, for some faculty, it would be important for my university to not back away from words like diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it isn't just that I'm a Black woman faculty person, but it's also that the work that I do, my research, it could be called woke. It could be called research that's about diversity, equity, and inclusion, right, under these under these sort of bizarre definitions. And I think, you know, I would want my university to be very clear that the reason that diversity, equity, and inclusion policies and practices, not the performative ones, but the real ones, got put in place was because of a long history of actually other people getting jobs or getting research grants or getting promoted because of their identities. I mean, I think so I don't know that if I'm being clear, but the reason for diversity, equity, inclusion practices and policies was to right historic wrongs and preferential treatment that some people got in our university, just generally kind of across the country and historically. So I think to move away from those out of fear right now is, I think I'd rather that I had an institution that was going to push back against those ideas, because it's the ideological piece that then becomes the practical.
I mean, so part of me is hesitant to comment on this because I am not on campus. During my times as a columnist, and there's been many when my life has been threatened or when I have stepped out and said something bold and provocative, the Globe has a roster of lawyers. Yes. And even when I was, I had to call the police and I had to change addresses and all that, yes, it was scary, but we have security, like actual retired detectives and police officers that are on the job. So I have a cover that a professor or a teacher just does not have from their academic institution. So I hesitate on a question like that because I guess my answer would have more to do with the community and what the community's responsibility is in supporting these institutions, supporting those educators and those students, because I do want to say, like, there isn't, yes, I meant what I said. We got to meet them where they are, and we have to stop conflating discomfort with violence. But I also mean what I say when I say there is no liberation movement that will ever be successful without the brilliant imaginations, possibilities, and education of our young folks, period. They are the key. They always have been, always will be. And if we as a community are not pouring into these spaces, whether it's the students or the staff, we have failed. Like, if we're not covering them, I think about the neighborhood in Worcester that formed the Human Ring when ICE came. If we are not forming a human ring around our educators as they try to go out and fight during this time, as our students are fighting during this time, as people are risking their jobs and their lives and their academic futures during this time, then we have failed.
Yes.
It is not there. There will be people who can afford, or maybe can't afford, but have the gumption and moxie to take a stand and risk getting fired or risk all their funding. But there will be people who can't, and they're going to covertly figure out new ways to hold space, and it might not look like what we want it to look like. And in that time, we have to have grace and support and that human collective understanding of we're going to be there.
Yeah, I'm just going to bounce. Yes. That was brilliantly said by Janae, and I'm just going to bounce off of that too, because it's easy for me, and not being an educator, to tell educators what to do, and you should be doing this, and you should be standing up and fight, and don't, recoil in fear. But I understand that there are real constraints in that, and I just second what you say about the community, building around them, and I will include myself in that as a journalist. How we write about that, how we talk about what professors are going through. That's a little harder, because in recent years, professors, a lot of sources that I had in academia have become much less willing to speak to me out of fear of retribution that they may suffer, and that is real. But we have to work harder to find ways to rally other people around educators, around institutions that are working very hard to continue to all we're asking these educators to do is just to fully educate these kids, not do anything above and beyond what a university is supposed to do. And if we cannot rally around them and give them that protection to do out of the box thinking within institutions. Yes, there are people who are leaving and doing other things. I just recorded a podcast before walking over here with Karen Attia, who had her class that she was teaching on diversity and international relations and journalism at Columbia, not renewed, even though the class was fully stacked, fully enrolled, waitlisted. Thank you for the word. My menopausal brain sometimes glitches. So she created her own class. She's holding something called Resistance Summer School, where she's teaching that same class at MLK Library in Washington, D.C. And she just reached out, she just, shouted out on her socials, hey, if I did something like this on my own, is anybody interested in doing it? And she thought there might be a handful of people, and they'd sit under a tree somewhere and just talk it out. And there were thousands of people. And so there are wait lists for future classes. And I was just thinking, I want to give educators the ability to think outside of the box in that way within their institutions. If they come up against a roadblock, how do we give them the tools that they need just to move differently, to continue doing the fundamental work? And, we talked a little bit before coming here about, changing the words but not the work, or doing other things.
I'll get to that.
But sorry, I don't mean to jump ahead of you, but just how I would love to hear more from educators about ways that I can support them in just changing how they move, thinking in a different way. One thing somebody said to me this week, and it was in the political context, but I think it works really well in the educational context too, is that right now we're in a space where there was World I. We were living in World I, we understood how things happen, and then all of a sudden, the changes within the past decade or so has been done by people who want a World II. They have a vision of World II, and they are destroying World I in order to build World II. And a lot of people who are resisting that, fighting back against that, are just trying to get back to World I when you can't. World I is gone, it's destroyed. What we should be doing is creating World III. and laying that work and moving to that. And that's what I want educators to do as well, is think about ways we create a different world for education that looks different and operates different, and that renews those values, because you can't always just go back to the way things used to be.
Y'all give me like a lot to think about for myself. Okay, so I wanna pull us back into something that both you all share, right? You mentioned not wanting to be in a position to tell educators what to do because you're not on a college campus, and I wanna break through that barrier, because I hear you. I understand what you're trying to say here, but in the same vein, though, we do this thing where we create a boundary around a college campus, and we assume that only that campus is our community, and only the people that are in that community is a community. And in the Thurman Center, there are wonderful students, faculty, and staff that come in, but all the time I see people who just walk in right off Comm Ave. They're like, it looks cute in here. You know what I'm saying? I like the staircase. The music is great. We feel good in here. And our students are like, can they come in? I'm like, yeah, they're a part of the community. You too are a part of the community. Have you tried venturing south of Boston University? Like, there are some great restaurants, coffee shop, and what do you know? People that you could speak to that are south of the campus, right? And I say that to say, because I've said this on numerous spaces, it does us no good to be called Boston University if we do not interact with Boston. So when you say, I have hesitations on telling educators what to do in a community, I kind of want to push back, because you all too, as journalists for the Boston Globe in the city of Boston, are part of our community. In so many ways, I just heard someone say that they work with interns who oftentimes come from the colleges and universities in the city of Boston. So I'm saying it this way because I think we have to look at this topic, yes, specifically to universities and campuses, but also pull back. There are people in our community here, that are struggling to do the same thing our college students, faculty and staff, and students are trying to do as well. They're struggling to have conversations about issues and things that they disagree with people. People are having these conversations, whether it be in the staff kitchen, in the barbershop, in the beauty salon, in the Dunkin' Donuts line when they get their coffee. People are struggling there too. So I want to pull us into that. This idea of civil discourse isn't just like a university problem. It's an everyday person problem. So if we pull it back to that way, what's your recommendation for people trying to figure this thing out, trying to figure out that I disagree with this person, they disagree with me, but they are taking it as an attack on their personhood when I disagree with them? What's your recommendation for people as we pull it back into a bigger picture? Because I love working with students, and I tell people all the time, they say, Nick, your audience is students. It is wonderful, but students are people.
Yeah.
So my audience is people, period.
Well, first I'm laughing because I was at Nick's beautiful center saying this thing to his students from stage about how they needed to get off campus and be a part of the city of Boston, or they were doing themselves in the city a disservice, and now he's saying it to me about y'all. So,
It's a hard conversation, Janae.
look at how that works. You know, at the heart of this thing is remembering we're all humans, and I really think one of the core issues is that everyone's having, whether you're an educator or not, a student or not, just humans in this society, is that we have gotten to this place where if I don't agree with you or you don't agree with me, then, you know, it's death to you and your mama. It's just like very much like, so there's zero grace. We have lost all sense and modicums of grace and like Sunday service behavior. It's just gone. And because someone doesn't agree with you, it has led to this culture of now you think you know something about them, but you don't. And it goes back to what I said about doing the journalism on people. So ask some more questions, have a conversation, like a conversation, not a yelling match. And I know that's rich coming from someone who writes loud like I have, because I speak this way, but I write loud. She does too. So I know that's real rich coming from here, but also that's how I write. It's not how it's not how I speak to people on a human level that I disagree with. And there's a lot of people my sister is white and conservative and Southern and very different from me in every way, and we don't vote the same, and we don't always agree. So I had to do that work on myself and figure out how can I move with grace and figure out how to still have a relationship with someone who I don't know really understands how harmful their political ideals are to my personhood. And only through grace can we even think that someone is gonna change their mind or pivot or reach across aisles or build a world three. And it's remembering who you are and whose we are. We built a world three, so did our ancestors. Freedom schools were a way of doing that. What Derecka Purnell did at Harvard Law School was a way of doing that. Like, our elders have already done this many times. They've already built anew many times. And it's until we can have grace, until we can step out on faith, until we can see the humanity in one another and imagine what we have yet to do, we're not gonna get there.
You know, this makes me think about, talking to people and listening to people with whom you disagree. This reminds me of, I think it was right after the shooting at the school. I'm forgetting the name of the school now, where so many Parkman. Again, perimenopause really does things to the brain. But there were protests in Washington, D.C., where a lot of young people were coming in and protesting. And I was at there was media coverage, and I was part of the media coverage outside this, and I was on a panel with Hugh Hewitt, who I probably agree with almost nothing with him. And before we even went on air live, there were people who were protesting, and they see him, and they start shouting him out and like really, going after him. And he turns around, and some woman shouts something nasty at him, and he turns around and he says, "Where are you from?" And she said, "Florida." And he's like, "Oh, whereabouts? I have some people there." And then he goes over, and they just start having a conversation. And by the end, before we went on live, the lady took a selfie with him. And then we went on live, and we were talking and about what was going on. And that was such a great lesson that when I went on, for a short period of time, I was a guest host on C-SPAN's Washington Journal, the morning call-in show. And the callers, man, if y'all watch that, they come loaded for bear, right? And it was the same sort of thing. They're like, "Oh, I think it's terrible," before they would even ask their question. George from, Newport News, "What's your question?" Well, I just want to start by saying that it's horrible of C-SPAN to have somebody who has been on Fox News, or horrible for C-SPAN to have someone who has been on MSNBC. This is supposed to be balanced, and you are not balanced. Okay, well, what's your question? And, they're still laying in, and I will say, "Well, what do you do there in Newport News?" "Well, I am a welder, but I lost my job. The company I work for went under." Well, how did that make it your life more difficult? Well, what would you like to see people here in Congress, in the building behind me, do for people like you? What do you need your lawmakers to respond to you? And what do you want the government to do for you for your taxpayer dollars? And we would have this conversation, and by the end, he was like, "Okay, thank you so much, love C-SPAN, bye." And it was exactly what you're talking about. It was seeing people. People want to be seen, and when you see them, it opens them up in a way and makes them listen in a way that they weren't ready to do before. It breaks through that tribalism. And I'm glad you reminded me of that, and I'm glad we're talking about this, because I can forget too. It's hard, and I can only imagine how hard it is for students who haven't even had the world experience that we have, because it's sometimes hard for me just to constantly get this drumbeat of negativity. I have to go through my inbox every single day and flag things, or get, well, now I open my inbox every morning, and it's like, there was a civility quarantine of an email, there was another, like, I get like 25 civility notifications that the Globe system took out a message that I got before it even hit my inbox. And it's just, it's wearying, it's tiring, as people attack my family too. It's really hard, and I forget to see the humanity in everyone, including those people. But that's something that we do. I think teaching civility has to start with teaching and underscoring that humanity.
Okay, so in 5 minutes, I'm going to ask the audience if you have any questions. So this is like me getting y'all ready in advance. And then I'm going to ask Paula to start us with this next question. One of my most beloved things to do with our students is to play whose tree is this idea, this piece of art connected to. I love to do it with music. We always have music playing in the Thurman Center, and I'm like, yeah, this artist is amazing. Like, this artist is of this person's tree. And they're like, who is that? And I'm like, well, this artist is of this other person's tree, and you like that music. Yeah, but like, who is that? Who is that? Is it this person? And I'm like, no, it's not that person. When did this music come out? I'm like, it came out in 1995. And I'm like, I ain't listening to that old stuff. And I'm like 1995 is not that long ago. Like what y'all doing, right?
I was in law school in 1995.
I'm saying it's not that long ago. Okay, so I put it to you all like that because my favorite thing about young people is they will dismiss history until you've created a climate for them to understand the value of history. Now, I say it like that because I initially wrote them off as people who are just dismissive of history. And then I learned it was about the climate I created for them to actually engage and learn the history. So I want to talk about archives with one of my favorite historians up here and the importance of using archives to address what we consider new problems. And I put it in that way as new because if my mother was in this room, she'd be like, boy, ain't nothing new under the sun. Like, you think you doing something, we done did this before. So what's the importance of using archival material, history, libraries, all of these wonderful things to address new problems? And I'm going to add a layer to what you mentioned. You mentioned diversity, equity, and inclusion. Let's add in there, right, how in history, we've always been doing this work. It just had other names.
Yeah, so your question right before was, what should we do? And I was going to say read, which I know that...
You got to tell them what to read.
Just read. I think the answers are in the archives. One of the things that students come into my history classes telling me, the first thing I ask them is, what do they already know about the history that we're going to look at, right? They've chosen my class for the most part, or they need it to like meet a general education requirement. But for the most part, they're in there because they want to be in there, a little bit or a lot. And I ask them what they already know and how did they learn that. And the truth is that they are getting not great history classes before they get to the college classroom. And sometimes their history classes didn't cover a lot of stuff. Like some students come in, and I teach African American history, and so they come into my class and they say, they learned about Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King. Like still, and I've been teaching an African American history survey course for 20 years or something like that. And it's I've generally gotten the same experience of high school history. So I always ask them what they already know, why they're in that room, and what they want to know from what we're doing. And yes, and then we do a lot of archival. And I often ask them if they could kind of write a history of their own lifetime, right? I mean, and that lifetime has changed, is shifting ground every first day of class. But they think historically already, right? I mean, many students, even, the last batch of students I was working with, put things in their lifetime history like the 2008 financial crash. They weren't born yet in some cases, but it was in their timeline. They knew about it. It had impact in some way on their families, on their own history. So students are already thinking historically, but what they don't quite know is what was all the conflict, the nuance of the conflict that happened in the histories that they've learned about. So when they think about the civil rights movement, for example, they think about King, and he made some marches and made some speeches, and everybody liked him, and then we got Civil Rights Act of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65, and boom, there we were, and now we're going backwards. And what they don't know is how much people disagreed with each other, how much people fought, all of the splits that happened organizationally. There were organizational splits all over that timeline. And that's the kind of stuff that I think changes how they think about the contemporary moment we're in, so that we can see the current movement that we're in and understand it's drama. It's a lot of drama. People sometimes don't like each other. They don't want to work with each other. They're going to go off and start something else. It's okay. We need all the things. So I think history and the archives helps them get into the drama that was part of all of these historical movements. I need the archives for Occupy because I remember when Occupy was happening and the drama that was happening in many of those spaces. I need those archives. I don't know where those are. So, because I think that would be amazing. There was so much drama happening in those spaces amongst people. So, yeah, I mean, I think reading in the archives, but even reading some, good history that talks about that drama could be really helpful, really for all of us to understand the moment that we're living in. It doesn't have to look like a unified thing. We don't have unified movements historically. It can look like a mess. And we need all the things that are in that mess.
So, first I want to say, as I wait for audience members to raise their hands to ask a question, my favorite thing about archives is reading letters from our heroes who did not like each other. Oh, my God. Students tell me about reality television all the time. I'm like, have you all ever met or read Zora Neale Hurston? Because, whoo, she didn't like a lot of people. And I love seeing her talk about Langston Hughes. Oh, my God. So does anybody have a question that they would like to ask the panel or in general?
It's for the panel. This conversation has triggered my K-12 journalist kind of angst, but I'm a recovering K-12 journalist. But what's missing, and what at least I would like you to address, is the role of higher ed in training the teachers who will train the students who will come up through the pipeline to get into the higher ed.
Tell us your name and where you're from.
Sorry, Peggy Barmore. I'm from the Vineyard in Albany, New York, and I'm a retired, I guess, or education writer for the Hechinger Report.
Well, I will say I get a lot of folks from our ed college who show up in my classroom, both graduate and undergraduates, who absolutely want all of the information that I have. They want all of the history that I'm teaching so that they can be better social studies teachers. They can know more things. I mean, I do a lot of teacher trainings. I just did one last week at the Boston Athenaeum for their 3-day teacher workshop. Teachers really, K-12 teachers want the stuff. They are applying for all of those programs. They are in classrooms. They're getting masters to be able to give K-12 students the information that they also want about how to live in the current world that we're in.
I will add to this is that I work a lot with master students who are going on to be K-12 teachers who often are trying to figure out what to do when the conversations get tense in the classroom, they're often indicated that they feel in some cases that they haven't adequately been prepared for that
Right.
moment. That moment will I approach something really difficult, whether it be racially, whether it be about sexuality and gender, and it happens in the classroom. What do I do in those moments with our students? And one of the things that I'm always asking them is like, how deeply do you listen to your students? The important things that they say, the things that you may consider trivial or unimportant, how deeply do you listen to those things? Because I often tell them that that's a foundational point to start with in addressing some of the conflict in those spaces. You're often ending up with students who are either don't know each other, they are learning each other, and they're learning with each other on how to sit in these really difficult moments. And they're actually dependent on you as an instructor to figure that out, because they may or not have yet the skill set to do it on their own. And so if you can't do it as an instructor, it's a strong chance that they won't be able to do it. And so how deeply are you listening to them to talk about anything? Because that's usually my reference point when students are disagreeing. I remember something that they said 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, 2 years ago. Like, I'm storing it all because I never know when a moment comes where I can use that to dispel harm that has occurred in the classroom. I remember you told me a story about when you dealt with this. You talking about this person's shoes. I remember you told me this story about you being insecure about something. How did you feel in that moment? Do you want them to feel the same way? They're often really struggling with something that I thought would be so basic. And it's not basic. It's just that we've gotten to the point where our content can be so heavy in a specific direction about specific subjects or related to them approaching certification, that the basic sort of human decency piece is something that they don't also realize that they need learning or coaching around.
The one thing I would add to that is the importance of educator collectives. In Massachusetts, we are so lucky to have the Teachers Lounge, TTL, and it is a collective of educators of color cultivating resources, trainings, fellowships. They also have a lot of fun together, but they actually really do exist to coalesce ways to uplift each other, K through 12 educators, and how they can better serve our babies. Shout out to Devin Morris. But so I think even if you're not in Massachusetts in education, then it's forming those collectives and figuring out how you can help one another answer those questions and stay inspired and fuel one another, because I know educators are burnt out the same way all of us who are doing any kind of change work are.
Richard Taylor, class of 71. I wanted to go back to the archival comment because it reminded me when you mentioned about Dr. King and Rosa Parks. So one, we have to figure out a way to lift up the material and get it out. Why? Because the whole notion of the American enterprise is forward and back, freedom and then Reconstruction, and Obama and then the backlash against Obama. But in this issue around chaos and movements, I remember, if I was to ask, in context of the bus boycott, if I was to ask this audience, who is Joanne Robinson in the context of the Montgomery bus boycott? If you know who she is, just raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. So Joanne Robinson was on the faculty and staff of Alabama State University. And she was the one who built the flyers, developed the flyers on a mimeograph machine to put out the word that there'll be a bus boycott tomorrow morning. She was not in a private school, she was at a public institution. They went after her like she had murdered someone. People who were behind the scenes, who stood up in this mess and in this chaos. So what we've done, we've got so much going, they didn't have as much. And I always say we did more with less. They did more with less. This isn't not a fight. We think it is, but compared to where they were. But we haven't taught that. That's gone. People don't know that. So we think we're in something. Yeah, we're in this, but come on, bring it. We got more resources. We got more intelligence, more talent than they ever had, but we haven't uncovered it through getting it out from our archives. So I think we've got to be in this always telling history about resistance. Always. Cheney, Goodwin, Schwerner. Just what Emmett Till's mother did with that photo. So we've got young people coming up who think we're all here on Martha's Vineyard because this is how the world works. No, it isn't. Somebody paid some dues. So I think the archival piece is really, really important, but we got to get it out, and we have to keep it out because when this settles down, something else is coming, and we have to say, okay, we've been there. Let's roll. So anyway, archives is important, history is important, chaos is important. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Can I just add, because the other thing too is that Joanne Robertson was part of the Women's Political Council, and that for years they had been in negotiation with the mayor about the harassment they were experiencing on the buses. So, and that Rosa Parks had been in Alabama for 10 years working on the Recy Taylor rape case. I mean, they just don't know. It also takes a long time for things to happen, and that people work on things for a really long time. So that's the other piece.
Hi, Tony Parham. Currently live in Durham, North Carolina. Born in Baltimore, I've lived in Boston, California, other places. So, hey man, yeah, blessed. So, thank you for sharing your thoughts. It occurs to me that I'll call them tactics, which you are describing as to how to touch on these different topics, that these tactics, including intentional empathy, including critical thinking and getting critical thinking folks, including teaching people grace and how to pierce through tribalism, the tribalism which is, of course, amplified by social media's tendency to create echo chambers. Seems to me that there needs to be explicit training of these tactics, not just in the context of particular topics, but these tactics themselves, that's the way that, an important way that we're gonna break through all this tribalism, this me versus they, to get people to think about an us. And so perhaps you can comment on that.
I think that is important. That would be crucial to have explicit training in how to do that. But my other question will be, well, what would you call that, and at what point would that be attacked to? I feel like it needs to become something that is fundamental, that not just in education, in the education of the educators. It should be fundamental in education, period. In the same way, I thought a lot about, I went to a religious high school, a Catholic high school, and I really enjoyed that experience because it was a pretty progressive place, especially for in the 90s for when I went. And, first I was told, okay, you have to take 4 years of English, 4 years of math, and 4 years of religion. I'm like, 4 years of religion? Like, that's not even, And I'm like, well, what am I gonna do? And there were wonderful philosophical and pan-religious and other kinds of classes that I took in high school that taught me so much, including that the foundation of just about every major religion, the foundation, even when I speak to my therapist, the foundation of meditating is all about love, like where Nick started, this fundamental idea that we are a collective, we are one. And what, and sometimes that seems crazy. It's like, oh, I'm one with my ops. Yes, you are one with your ops, and you need to listen and experience this world together. In this realm, we are in this together fundamentally. And the more we try to silo ourselves, the more that we attack ourselves, the farther away we get from our true spirit. And so just in that way, not done in a religious way, of course, but just in a fundamental, empathetic way, I think that kind of teaching has to begin pre-K. You know, your kids are all together in a class. Okay, some of them will be different. Some of them will come from different places. It is that's a point to educate people that we are all the same. We come in different packages. We come from different places. Our parents say and think different things, but we're all kids, and we all have thoughts, and we all have loves, and we all have things that pain us. But that's how we get together. I think that needs to be a fundamental part of education all the way up. That's not just something that can be trained into educators. That has to come from the bottom up. I'm grateful that I, was thinking about that and taught that way in high school in a way that I don't think is often taught. But I think that's where you have to get to it, because although that seems really simple, it's really hard to do in practice, and it's really easy to forget, especially if you are a part of a marginalized community where things are coming at you and you're putting up barriers just for your own protection. It's easy to forget that. And I know I would count educators in that too. They are in a community that is under constant attack, and it's hard to remember that, but I think that is fundamental to everything, not just education. That is just fundamental to how we move as a society.
I think outside of school or even pre-K, it's at home. There's some things everyone in here knows. Like maybe you come from a shoes-off house, and that's just something you carry with you for the rest of your life. You get to the house, you flip your shoes off. Maybe you come from a don't you sit on that bed with them outside clothes on house. Those are things you learn before pre-K. You learn about your outside clothes, your shoes, to put on, don't be ashy. I mean, my mom is, rest her soul, but like one of her number one cardinal rules, next to don't smell like outside, take them outside clothes off, was like, don't be dusty. You were not allowed to be ashy. Rub some Palmer's cocoa butter on your elbows.
Nivea.
We was a Palmer's house. But I'm just saying, I'm on a tangent now, but it's really like,
Once my mom texted me when I was on C-SPAN. She was like, get your elbows.
but I'm just saying, and that's something you knew better from when you were, you knew that so some of this stuff is like collectively as humans, we have to get back to a place, or not even back, or to a place where we're gonna decide, this is what we're teaching at home, so that when we get to school, it's a little easier to teach it in pre-K and K-12 and then college. I was the queen of why. But why, Daddy? Why? He was like, go look at that encyclopedia. I don't know. But it's like critical thinking. He didn't even know he was teaching me critical thinking, and he's not a critical thinker. But he was.
So at Boston University, President Gilliam talked about it earlier in her address. She mentioned that the Living Out Our Values initiative, which is out of our office, and I have the wonderful honor of being one of the committee members on it, trying to figure out what a values framework could look like. And then we decided that we need to do some different work in some different areas. And we split off to another subcommittee on civil discourse, and some folks came to me and said, Nick, you should probably chair this. I'm like, I don't really want to do that, but all right, I got you. Like, I'll do whatever because I enjoy this. And the question that I keep pushing the committee to explore as we create a set of proposals and recommendation for what this could look like in our community is, how do we think about the responsibility for our entire community to have a role in discourse on our campus, not just a few set offices, not a specific, just an institute, but what does it mean to create an environment where a facilities worker feels comfortable in the climate and an environment to have a conversation? Yeah. It's been important to really think about that. And every meeting, I tell folks, like, dream. Like, don't tell me what we can't do first. Don't do that. Please don't. Like, there's just not a lot of space for that because we have to produce something. So let's dream first. Secondly, I know that there are barriers that exist. No one told us to sit in this meeting and think about all the barriers that we have. No one told us to do that. That's just a dream about how we could find solutions and how we can nurture an environment. So I'm really asking you to use your imagination first and not your cynicism first, right? Use your imagination first and not your cynicism. And there are wonderful ideas where folks have come out and talked about, like, what does this mean for the tenure process for professors who are becoming tenured at the university? Complicated topic for another forum, right? There are ideas about what this could look like if there's faculty support specifically on this issue, that if faculty are incurring difficult conversations, what's the resource that they can go directly to, or can somebody come and visit their classroom? I say that to say that the answer to your question is, I think at Boston University, is that we're working on trying to figure out what this could look like. But I do think it's important that we're trying to figure it out, what it could look like for the entire community and not just a small set of people. We're trying to figure it out. But I think some of this is having this conversation and having the conversations all the time. And I've said it several times up there, a lot of it is resisting your cynicism. I'm a cynic too. Sometimes I don't believe it's going to work out that way, but I love this book by Miriam Kaba, who's a prison industrial complex abolitionist. And in the book, she talks about this idea of what hope is and what hope could be. And she says, she quotes, I believe it's Cornel West, but I could be mistaken, so don't quote me on that. But she mentions that hope is knowing the evidence, right? Knowing the evidence and watching it be real and also watching it change. So I often tell people, resist that cynicism a little bit. There's a chance that the evidence that you know to be true has potential to change. And so I would say we're trying to figure it out, but have some hope. And I would encourage you to really use your imagination instead of your cynicism.
She also says hope is a discipline.
Yep.
That it's a practice, right, as opposed to a feeling. But Nick and I disagree about this, but I actually think there is a role for complaint and cynicism. And I'll quote a different scholar, which is Sarah Ahmed, who says that our imaginative process to create actually begins with the complaint.
Absolutely.
It begins with the finding, with articulating the thing that's wrong, that we have to be able to do it and articulate it in order. We're already dreaming at the moment that we have the complaint. So I just want to, there's a role for it just because I'm a complainer.
We're always in harmony. We're in
Another
harmony.
difficult conversation happening up here.
And look at all the grace.
Hi, my name's Alona Wilson, and I'm a BU graduate also, but out of the graduate school as opposed to undergrad. I work in the field of museums, curator and administration, and one of the things I think you guys are also provoking in this conversation, and so I'd like to extend upon that statement of being bigger than the place you're in. Working in the museum fields, we're under tremendous censorship right now. So it's the censorship of information. Archives are extremely important because that proves it. Digitization of archives is important, but the source of who the digitizing organization is extremely important. So I think there is a platform that I'd like to ask that we expand is the role of public education, which are museums. And museums are that extension role of, and we work closely with the information out of universities. My experience is both. I have public as well as private museums. So I've worked for private museums that are underneath state censorship. We're always under federal censorship because your grants are federal. In the last 25 years, what I've seen is when we put DEI, it was almost like a word check. Whereas we've been doing DEI, and that was part of my interest in museums. It was one of the places where you could explore cross-cultural intersectionality. And you could do it through a visual, there was so many different ways in which we could have that conversation. But the censorship issue now, my concern, is you have to change the word. And when you're in an academic environment, a public education environment, the words matter. And they matter, they are tremendously important. So I think when we look at education on that platform of just, for example, Boston University's campus, Boston is so rich with institutes. And these institutes are also part of that whole platform of knowledge. And I think we can be stronger when we look at the broad perspective of knowledge as a society. Where do we go for our knowledge? How do we build that knowledge? How do we protect that knowledge? And make that part of a platform of how do we have these conversations about holding to truth? And where will that truth be? And where are those information sources? TikTok is not a good information source for knowledge. It's a good information source to play, but it's not a good information source for knowledge. And so we have to be able to build upon one word is not knowledge. 2 words, you're getting a little better at it. 3 or 4, maybe. But we need to make words important again. And not only the words, but the emotions they convey, the critical thinking. And so we have to kind of go back to some of the basics. And I really see where we have a unity with college campuses, and we can extend that. So I'd like to open that for conversation.
Thank you. Where are you from?
I live in Northampton, and but I've worked in Boston before. And right now I'm Northampton and the Vineyard, so I'm both.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I pull to the front the piece about changing the name or the word and trying to do the word? That was one of our questions, and we didn't get to it. I just want to pull that to the front.
Yeah. You said a bunch of things, and I have a lot of thoughts. So what I didn't say during my bio is that my columnist journey was very much through the lens of arts and culture. So museums matter quite a bit to me. So first, I just want to affirm that work and say I actually don't think anyone is confused about the role of arts and arts archives in theater and the very expansive way in which we define arts as an educational tool. It is very much why this administration, one of the very first things they did after Inauguration Day is go after the Kennedy Center and then museums and Smithsonian, et cetera, is because they are very clear that there is an intersection between museums and art spaces, academic institutions, book bans, NEA, the humanities. All of this is how we get our knowledge of self. This is why when we go to war, the first thing we go after is arts and books and et cetera, because they're trying to not just defund us financially, but spiritually and identity-wise, and how we see ourselves, learn ourselves, know ourselves. So I actually don't think there is confusion about that intersection at all. I think it is everyone's very aware of it and fighting very hard to protect it. I think the thing is we have to, again, coalesce. How can we, I'm gonna move this over so she can get in here too. But how we can coalesce together and fight for one another, because I feel like right now it's very much like all the houses are on fire and everyone's like, we gotta get the fire out in our house. So it's like, how can we be sharing the hose, sharing the fire hydrant, and figuring out ways to share space with one another in these various fights. And then as far as the word situation, something I said earlier, I'm gonna try to say again and a little differently or more clearly, and that's there are going to be people who can step out on the word, on the initiative, and they don't need the funding. You know, we have a group in Boston that was like, we good. We don't want your federal funds. We'll figure it out. And then there's going to be people who do not have, they will not exist if they don't figure out how to cave. But in their complicity, they're going to figure out covert ways to still do the work, to redefine the word, to make a new word for it, which we have always done. We've always found new words and found new language. So I don't think it's that the words will no longer matter. It's that our vocabulary will expand and we will get sharper and more collectively bound in how we fight for things.
That's hard to add to such a thorough. Yeah, I think you have to be grounded in truth, right? So my hero since I was very young is Ida B. Wells, because her work was solely on telling the truth. And you just have to say it. There will always be times that certain terms are under attack. There was CRT, there's DEI. It's because it's easy to use code to try to define people and define learning and define everything by these codes. It makes it easier to attack. I mean, honestly, the federal government was literally going through things and just looking up words and taking them out to the point that, you know, equity, it got flagged when it referred to like private equity. I mean, it's a ham-handed way that they're going at it. But to amplify Janae's point, the work and the truth-telling always continues. It just continues in other places. It continues, we get the education and the history, not just in our museums. We get them in our churches, we get them in our communities, we get them in a host of places. I mean, just one of the things I love about coming to Oak Bluffs each year is just seeing the living history in this place, in this soil, that, you know, a lot of people don't even know or understand. It's just literally in the earth here. So the truth is always there. It's just about telling it, and there's always been under attack, but you still need to tell it. I mean, it seems simplistic, but I think that's the foundational core of this work, is that you keep telling the truth. You use the words that mean what they mean. And if people attack that, you just tell it in a different way. We have a big, expansive language, and we even make new words. Like I've loved the taking back agreeance, because it does mean something. Well, it means something slightly different from agreement, and it's important. It's the coming together. It's the people coming together and to have the tough dialogue, and then it's that process, and the agreement is the thing that comes in the end. We can use language, we can define and that word's from the 1500s, and it died out, and we brought it back. We can do amazing things with language, and keep pushing that truth forward.
Coming up at the end of the month, one of our Union Chapel forums is titled "Banning Books is Banning Our History," just to pick up on that thread. That's later in August. Ford, would you like to offer a message on behalf of the BU Archives?
Thank you. Yeah, my name's Ford Curran. I'm one of the archivists at Boston University Archives. I've been at the university since 2004. My daughter is now a sophomore. But just to pick up on what you guys are all saying, the BU Archives is a really rich resource. Paula uses us for a lot of classes, and it really does touch on every point that's been said today. And it makes the past relevant to the kids today. And Paula can speak to some of this, but I invite everybody to please, whenever you're on campus, come check us out. Through the library's website. We're now part of the libraries, so you can see what we have online. You can come in and visit us, and we encourage it. It'll hopefully help the mission here. Thank you.
Thanks, Ford. Any other questions? We're about to wrap it up. I see Michelle. You have a question, comment? Nick, you want to close us out with a good thought?
And you're right, so much pressure. Listen, but nope, I was ready actually. So in thinking about this panel, we thought about it a lot of different ways. We wanted to bring a lot of different viewpoints to it, and I am always reminded of the words of Howard Thurman in Any Stage, and I'm going to take the opportunity to talk about that. One of the things that I love that he shares in an essay in the 1950s to an audience of foreign dignitaries, politicians, university leaders, I love that he puts this message in front of them that any attitudes, private or group, which prohibit people from coming into across-the-board contact with each other works against the implementation of the love ethic. Therefore, any structure of society that does not provide maximum opportunities for free-flowing circulation among one another works against social and individual health. Any and every time someone asks me, what is the work of Howard Thurman? I say to them that to reduce him to a theologian does him a disservice and does the people who love his work a disservice. He's more than that. I always tell people that he had two goals. One, he wanted to help you on this journey to learn more about your personal and yourself. He would say, how do I go deep inside and listen to the sound of the genuine? And then if I do not find time to nurture and cultivate that sound of the genuine, then I will spend the rest of my life helping someone else find theirs. Secondly, he would say to folks is that community is his single greatest quest in life. If that to you doesn't sound like someone who's concerned with social and individual health, in so many ways, I would say he's a public health worker. In so many other things, if we really got time for a conversation in love, I would say he could be an abolitionist. So I say to reduce him to a theologian is extremely reductive and does him and all of us a disservice. More importantly, I say that to say one of the things that he loved the most is he loved taking the titles out of things for people and speaking to us just as who we are, or as he would say, where we ought to be as people. People trying to learn, people trying to love. And so my comments about cynicism have been really about his teachings weighing heavy on my mind and heart. He's another voice in my head every time I want to do something petty. I'm not going to lie. I just started thinking like I can hear that deep baritone voice with these deep pauses asking me, who are you really? What do you want really? And how do you propose you obtain it? These are the fundamental questions that he asks the students in his class. These are the fundamental questions that we have continued in the Thurman Center to ask our students these questions, because I think these questions put us on a right path to figure out how do we nurture and steward the health of our communities. So I'm hoping that some of the work that we've done in this room have given us an opportunity to do that. And I'm hoping that we are all in some way, form, or fashion committed to doing that work for not just ourselves, but for our community. Does that work for you, Karen?
It's a great panel. Give them a hand, please. Really outstanding. We couldn't have thought of a better group. BU, our college president, who has got the world on her shoulder, doing a great job. Give her a hand. Madam President, please stand up. We got to salute you. Got to salute you. And I thank, as I have to often say, the Howard Thurman Center physically is just an amazing, amazing edifice, and what goes on there is a tribute to his legacy, King's legacy, Reverend Dr. Lawrence Edward Carter, who is retiring as the inaugural dean of Morehouse King Chapel, also from that school, and the university. Who else am I missing? Dr. Fluker as well, Cartwright, Floyd Flake, Congressman Floyd Flake, who was also head of the King Center, Bishop John Bryant, all have come through our theology school. I could be here forever, but this school is amazing. Its values, as we talked about, its foundation. Many academic institutions are struggling with the history and where they are. BU stands tall. So feel proud, and there's a lot of good stuff going on for the weekend. Please enjoy BU back in the house. Thanks very much.
Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you in weeks to come.